This episode of the Bill Simmons Podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. That's our presenting sponsor since 1973. We have basketball and NHL in full swing, college basketball, concerts, wrestling, operas. My mom buys opera tickets. I keep telling you this. I'm not lying. She buys opera tickets. She really wanted me to mention this on the podcast. She's convinced that I talk about my dad too much on the podcast and that she gets a shortchanged. So now I have to talk about her opera habits. But yeah, SeatGeek, everything can be done on SeatGeek on your phone with just 2 taps. Everything is fully guaranteed. It is the easiest way to shop for the best tickets thanks to their revolutionary grading system that will literally steer you one way or the other with tickets. They have colors. It's so easy to understand. Try it out. Download the SeatGeek app today or go right to SeatGeek.com. We are also brought to you by the Ringer NBA show and the Ringer NFL show because I was on both of those this week. I co-hosted a Ringer NBA show with Chris Vernon on Monday. We broke down the Boogie Cousins trade. Check that out if you missed it. And then on the Ringer NFL show, Mike Lombardi and I talked about some free agency and some trade subplots that are kind of on our radar. Because right now everyone is focused on basketball. So we thought, there's some football stuff going on too. We put that on the Ringer NFL show. You can subscribe to both of those on iTunes, on Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you get that stuff. And we're also brought to you, obviously, by TheRinger.com. That's where you can find my column every Friday, give or take, mostly, almost all the time. Fridays, TheRinger.com. Yeah, that's where I am. So one thing before we get to this podcast, we taped it last week. Had some really fun podcasts lately. If you fell behind, or if you got swamped, I get it. My feelings aren't going to be hurt, but we're on a really good run right now, and I think once football ended, I really wanted to double up my efforts to have fun conversations with all kinds of people, and this is somebody that qualifies. One of the better thinkers that I've ever read about the tech industry and just everything, tech business, where things are going, all that stuff. And I'd been dying to have him on, but he lives in Taiwan, so it was a little tough to pull off. But he was in town last week, and we just had a whole conversation about really where stuff's going and Facebook, Amazon, Snapchat, Google, all these places, how they're going to affect the next 15 years of my life. I think it's really worth listening to. I think you'll enjoy it. And here it is. Here with Ben Thompson from Stratechery.
I'm better
Stratechery. Stratechery. It's like the same problem I have with Croatian names where I don't know the itch or the ick.
The name, the problems with the name. Yeah, when you talked about how the months you spent to come up with the name, The Ringer.
Easy to spell, easy to pronounce.
I probably should have done that.
Stratechery. When did you start this site?
I started it in 2013, but it became a full-time job in 2014. So coming up on 3 years.
Became like you had no choice in the matter?
No. The goal is always to be my own choice in the matter. So
I remember reading you way back when. I was at Grantland at the time. We're like, who's this guy? What's going on? Is this a fake name? Is this somebody who's living in Silicon Valley who knows this stuff? How did you, what was the process that led to you knowing so much about this stuff when you're not in that world?
Well, I've always been I was obsessed with technology from a very young age, basically like junior high on when I first found out this stuff. And I'd always been attracted to the sort of business side of things all along. But I kind of grew up in small town Wisconsin. No one I knew worked in Silicon Valley or business or anything like that. So it never even really occurred to me to do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was in my 20s, I'm living in Asia. And my wife, who I owe a ton of credit for, she's like, why don't you go work in technology? I'm like, yeah, I should probably do that. So I got an MBA mainly because it was the fastest route to legitimacy in the U.S. job market. And from there, I went to Apple and then Microsoft. And then I started at Microsoft. But it's that 20 years of in the wilderness, just doing nothing but thinking about this stuff. And then, I wrote for the college newspaper and stuff like that. So I had some sort of experience writing, but it's people ask me, oh, how do you do what you do? Like, well, you got to go back to junior high school and like obsess over this for a really long time. And that's basically how it happened.
When you started it, how many times were you writing a week?
Well, I actually started it with a goal of, because right now I write 4 times a week, and one's free and 3 or 4 pay. And I always wanted the extra. I always had I started it with the goal of it being a business. And so many people like just write a ton and then they throw up a paywall. It's like, oh, sorry, now I got to pay. And it's kind of like this really nasty taste in people's mouth. So I always wanted it to be, if you wanted to pay, you could get more. So I actually purposely did about 2 times a week to start. And with the idea that eventually, if you wanted to pay, I would write for you every day, and then when I'd have time to do it.
And what do you remember what you were writing that first year? Like what kind of?
Well, it's
was
funny,
it big picture stuff or was it little picture stuff?
No, I've always been sort of like. So the thing I write about is like basically the strategy and business of tech, because tons of people write about products, right? There's just all kinds of blogs writing about tech products, but to write about business and strategy was kind of an unfilled niche, mainly because all the people who know that stuff are either like executives at tech companies or the VCs or stuff like that. So,
ironically, all of them subscribers to your thing now.
Well,
they're like, "Who's this guy?"
Now, yeah. So I'm writing about this, and so I was always writing about that sort of big picture stuff. Actually, the guy I owe a ton to is Steve Ballmer of all people. So I was at Microsoft, and I couldn't write about Microsoft. I was at Microsoft when I started, and a few months later, I quit Microsoft, and I quit 2 days later. After I quit, he reorganized the company, which I thought was a terrible idea, and all the reasons were dumb. So I got 3 great articles out of that were pretty widely spread. Then a few months later, he buys Nokia, which was a terrible deal. That's still the highest traffic day in the history of my site, because I was in Taiwan, and it happened in European time, so I was awake and knowing the U.S. was.
So you had like the first piece?
So I had the first piece, like the worst deal ever or something like that, and it was everywhere, like
wow.
Crazy. And then he got fired, so I got another whole series, what Microsoft should do next, going forward, blah, blah, blah. So he like carried the site for the first 9 months. So thanks, Steve. I appreciate it. I have to say, for the record, I was thrilled about the Clippers. It's like his destiny in life. I think it's awesome. I love watching him on the sidelines. So I have no enmity to the guy.
His destiny in life in a good way or a bad way?
No, in a good way. I think it's great. Like he did a lot.
I can't say it's been going great.
Yeah, he did a lot for. I think he gets a bit of a bad rap. Like a lot of Microsoft's problems were sort of, were going to happen whoever was the CEO. I don't think he necessarily made it better, but he did a lot for Microsoft growing up to make Microsoft what it was. So he gets his reward. Now he gets to be an NBA owner, which we would all love to be. So good for him.
So so you start this 4 years ago, and over those 4 years, like so much shit has changed. Like think about it. Apple had the biggest lead you can have and just was on the all-time hot streak. You had Twitter, which everybody was like, oh, when Twitter goes public, and and Twitter basically looks exactly the same as it did 4 years ago somehow.
Yeah, well, it was the same as like 8 years ago. That's kind
right,
of part
8
of the
years ago.
problem.
Yeah, 2008. You had Snapchat, which was a baby, which was interesting, but nobody really knew where that was going. And so many things, it's just so tumultuous, and it flips and it goes this way, that way. Why don't we start with Apple? Where do you see Apple going these next few years? They have not had a quote-unquote hit in a while.
The problem for Apple is that the iPhone was basically the greatest product in the history of products. And the reason was it was
greatest or most successful?
I mean, whatever you want to call it. Okay. I give it all kinds of superlatives. Like, it was the old model where you manufactured a device and you sold it for a profit. But it was like differentiated by the future, which is like software and services and the cloud and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know that there will ever be a product like it again, just because the world's changing, right? Now we like rent cars, like, or we get an Uber or whatever. We don't buy we don't buy stuff. And I think that's going to be the case more and more. And to have this one device that sells like that is never going to happen again. So the problem for Apple is not Apple per se. It's where's the market opportunity for Apple in the long run, beyond just kind of like milking, the iPhone and its associated stuff for as long as they can.
I'm going the other way. I think Apple is totally fine, and I think they are judged almost like how we judge LeBron.
Yeah, that's fair.
Where LeBron just can't win. It's like he's got to win the title and win the MVP every year, and everybody is so desperate to just be like, oh, the next guy, hey, it's Curry, hey, it's the unicorns, and that's just the way it goes with some of these people. Brady felt that way. Brady had the same thing, then Brady wins the Super Bowl, then it flips the other way. Oh, Brady the GOAT. And that's just the way it goes. With Apple, it's like they still dominate the app market. They still have a huge hold in podcasts and Apple TV, and anyone who has kids probably has Apple TV if they can afford it. And the Macs, the iPhones, they're able to release this phone that people buy, even though they just bought the last one 8 months ago.
Oh, of course, yeah.
iPads, which I know hasn't been as big as people thought, but I read just about everything on my iPad.
Yeah, well, I know because I get lots of
I
get
send
tons
you
of
emails from my iPad. Yeah,
I was just gonna say
I can
usually
type
the
on my
emails
iPad.
I get he says sent from iPad. It's some crotchety old man complaining about something, and plus Bill Simmons. Which I mean, draw your own conclusion.
Beautiful 4-paragraph emails. I can type really well on my iPad. I like the iPad, and I don't know. I think Apple's fine. I think people keep expecting them to come up with the next unbelievable thing, and it's like, hey, how many times can you do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you said you took the other side, but I agree. I mean, there's always been an Apple's doom narrative for as long as Apple's existed, and it's always been stupid. Well, no, it wasn't stupid back when they were doomed, but for the last 15 years, it's been stupid. And actually, I started right about Apple a ton at the beginning because that was the last Apple was doomed. Samsung was on the rise.
Oh, yeah, remember that? Samsung had its little day in the sun there.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was one of the articles that got me a lot of traction early. Was I wrote like Samsung's in big trouble, like and that was right at the peak when they were high, and like Apple's totally fine, and that's been the case, and they will continue to be fine. The iPhone's going to keep selling, like
especially the wireless charger thing. If that's real, that's a big innovation.
I mean, but the other great thing about iPhones is you drop them and they break and they wear out and the batteries get old and it's so essential to your life, and it's going to stay essential to your life for a very long time. So like they're going to stay tremendously profitable and powerful for a long time. So when I say that the market's not there, it's more like there's not going to be another iPhone. That's more the observation as opposed to they're like going down the tubes, like Twitter.
I think they missed some
like
opportunities. But I also think it's a gigantic company that was up to a lot of different things, and sometimes you miss stuff. Like, I think they could have owned podcasts 2 years ago. They just could have taken them off the market and just owned it and had everybody's. Yeah. And they chose not to, and I think it was a mistake.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone was even aware of that. And I think they still have a chance, just because the podcast market is like crying out for someone that provides some sort of metrics around it, to really enable advertising to take root in a deeper way than it does. All you have to is now, like they're all long-term purchase, or like either big purchases like mattresses or something like that, or stuff that you buy and you use again and again. So you like a lot of lifetime value from it. To like the branding advertising, that's much harder to sort of justify, just so you don't know how many people are listening. Downloads, maybe. It's always a little sketchy, like who's measuring and what. But beyond that, you have zero visibility.
Well, for the sponsors, they can tell us with the URLs and with the offer codes, stuff like that. They have somewhat of an thing. But you're right. But
that doesn't work for like Coca-Cola, right? That only works for like big purchase items.
Well, the other thing is bigger companies are always 4 or 5 years behind of everything.
Yeah,
so like in 2020, Coca-Cola's going to be like, hey, podcasts, what's going on here? We felt that. I never really paid attention to this stuff that much until we launched Grantland, because up until then I was just writing about sports. And but then Grantland, when we were working on it and we knew podcast was going to be a part of it because the podcast was so essential to what I was doing. But started thinking about a podcast network, and then remember YouTube was throwing around all that money.
Yeah.
In late 2011, YouTube was like, hey, we have $100 million. Who wants it? And we were at Grantland. We were like, we'd like some of that. Can we have? And it was so complicated within ESPN because on YouTube they run the ads at the beginning.
Right.
ESPN's used to controlling all of those ads, so they're like, well, if we do that, what if we have a deal with Subway and they run an ad for Jack in the Box? And so by the time it played out, we got probably half as much money as we could have. But I was just so fascinated by the mechanics of all these different decisions that these big companies made. They just get behind something, they go. And YouTube, within a year, that was done, right? And when you're making content, you're just trying to figure out, all right, is this a short-term thing? Should we grab it? Or is this a real initiative? And the ebbs and flows of that, watching that since 2011, it's really riveting.
Yeah.
It's really like
Facebook
sports.
is a big one now, right?
Facebook's a big
throwing
one.
money here and there, and now they're not throwing money here and there.
Yeah, Facebook a year ago, live. We want live. You want live? You want in? And now it's like, now they're not into the live as much. And sometimes I'm sure it's trial and error, but I think part of the problem with the live content is that a lot of it was just guys sitting on their couch.
Like we are right now.
Yeah. It's like, hey, we're live. We're live. All right, but what am I getting? I'm not getting quality content. Facebook to me is, I just think if you had to bet on anyone, I'd bet on Facebook and Netflix because they just have so much capital and so much money and they're just throwing it at content. And I don't know. It's going to be really hard to topple that.
Amazon's the other one.
Amazon, yeah.
What's terrifying about Amazon? What's terrifying about Facebook is because Facebook has their audience is so overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like basically, content producers have no choice but to do whatever Facebook wants. So they just have like they don't even need to pay people half the time because people will just do whatever they want because they have no choice but to do it.
Yeah, that's what they were offering with Facebook Live. Do Facebook Live. Well, why? Because we'll promote it. It's like, okay, but.
Yeah.
But that's what they can do because they're Facebook.
Yeah. The thing with Amazon was so terrifying is because they're monetizing Prime Video with Amazon Prime, right? And they're like thinking, how much money can we make off this guy for the next 35 years, right? So their time scale is so extreme that they will spend all kinds of money to like make the service more valuable. I mean, Netflix is already eating everyone's lunch because they have a longer time frame than anyone else because they're thinking about, this show will not just be attractive to our current customers, but will help us get new customers in 3 years, right? I mean, if I sign up for Netflix today, Orange is the New Black or whatever is like still compelling for me to watch. And now that the international market, so they can reach way more people. So like, oh, we come into Hollywood, we got like a 5-year, 10-year time frame. We can just outbid all these guys. Amazon's like, oh, nice time frame. We got a 50-year time frame. Like, watch us walk in here. So I mean, all the Hollywood guys are kind of screwed, right? Because they're so short term in their thinking.
Yeah.
And in part because TV was a short-term medium. It's linear. You only watch it, you're all focused on that first run. And these guys are focused on like runs years down the road. And it's a timing mismatch that's almost impossible to sort of compete against.
Netflix also has the luxury of they added 7 million subscribers in the last quarter.
Right. No, exactly.
That's a shitload of money. Whereas you have ESPN going the other way where they're losing subs, every quarter. But where Netflix goes with all the shit they're building, like I almost feel like it doesn't have a ceiling.
Yeah,
you're spending $6 billion a year on content.
Yeah, they're doing 1,000 hours of content this year or something.
I was saying to somebody, it's like the difference of they can take like if this was football, they're competing against other teams. Like in football, you'd be like, oh, you get a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh round pick, right? And Netflix has like 100 third-round picks.
Right. Well,
so
you talked the other day of your dream Patriots trade. They go back from they get the number 2 pick and then end up with the entire third round.
Netflix is Belichick. They're like, we have another third-round pick, and they're just throwing it at like, hey, Jason Bateman, want to show? And then they're just throwing them around, and they really only have to bat like 2 for 100.
Yeah.
And if they have Make It a Murderer and they have Stranger Things, and that can carry their whole business they can. I mean, they've missed on so many shows and they've spent.
But the shows
so
they miss,
much
what's
money.
so cool about the shows they miss on is the shows that are hits drive new subscribers. They hear about it, but the shows that miss those new subscribers, like I want to watch something, they flip on Netflix. There's something else to watch.
Yes,
right. There's always stuff to watch on Netflix, and yeah. And the other thing when Netflix figured out that the whole on-demand thing, it didn't really click for a long time. But remember when Netflix did that Stars deal, right? That kind of got the streaming started. So Stars library was 11,000 movies, right?
Yeah.
The effective library size for Stars was actually only 1. It was whatever movie they were showing on the Stars channel, right? The day Netflix started streaming that catalog, their effective catalog size was 11,000 because they could stream because you had it all on demand. And it was such a mismatch in consumer, like what people came to expect from TV and the way they could think about monetizing that again, this is the tough thing in business. When someone comes at you and their business model is just totally different than yours.
Yeah.
You're screwed. I mean, it happened to Microsoft. Google did it to them with when Ballmer was there. It's happening here in Hollywood.
So remember what was the thing Netflix did? I'm going to say 2008 or 2009. They spun off their service.
Yeah,
what was it called?
Something Flicks. I can't remember. Like the DVD service. It was a bad name. I can't remember what it was.
And it was like a joke. I mean, they got annihilated for it. And at that point, you would have thought Netflix was going to be in the toilet in 2 years.
Time to buy stock, man. It was way down. Yeah.
It was like, wow, these guys are just idiots. They don't know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like one of the most unbelievable business stories ever, where you had all of these different networks who all should have been thinking we should start our own streaming services ourselves. Instead, they just do the quick buck and they sell their libraries to Netflix. Yep. Netflix grabs all the libraries from everybody. They use it to build this subscription business that allows them to make so much money that now they can produce content.
So
now
if they pull it away, it doesn't matter because they have all their own stuff.
So all of these networks collectively, it would almost be like if you had the 10 best NBA teams basically started a league that crushed the NBA and didn't mean to, like the G League, this Gatorade League they're doing. Yeah, we'll fund this. And it just got out of control. And now all of a sudden Netflix is the biggest competitor.
No, you see this again and again, though. And now all the studios are stuck. All the networks are stuck because Netflix gives them so much money. Yeah. They can't stop now. Like, they're
it's
addicted.
Like crack. They're like crack addicts.
Exactly. And it's one of the most classic stories of like, this business term you hear all the time, like disruption or whatever. But that actually is what it's like, where Netflix came in with a different business model, serving people who weren't served by the current companies. Like, people wanted to watch whatever they wanted at a certain time, and they come in and the companies are helpless. They're literally helpless because they cannot stop selling to Netflix. They cannot stop funding the company that is their imminent demise.
It's remember amazing. When I was at ESPN, when we sold, like, we were just so delighted that 30 for 30 was profitable. And it was this, we had created this thing that, we're paying, I think it was like $500,000 per documentary, right? So we do 30 of those, cost $15 million.
Yeah.
Plus, like, you're throwing a couple extra million for the ones that went over, promotion, the time on the network, maybe all in, it's 25 million if you just add everything up. And then what we didn't realize at the time was that it was evergreen content for ESPN.
Exactly. That stuff's gold.
Yeah, which I wish I could say, like, I knew that, I told them, but we just didn't. We were just trying to do good documentaries. We didn't know the Fab Five would be on 240 times, and that anytime a playoff game ended early, a playoff series ended up early, they could put the Fab Five instead of Game 6 and get a half decent rating. It's just the evergreen content is really what's great about it.
And that's why Netflix doesn't do sports, right? Because they want all evergreen content.
Right. So at some point, when Netflix was starting to buy stuff, I remember we sold 30 for 30. It was either Netflix or Hulu. I think it was Netflix. And I can't remember what we got, but it was like, yeah, they paid this and they have all the 30. And I was like, that's great. What a great. And you don't think like, yeah, we're helping feed this beast.
Yep.
We slaved over this series, and now Netflix just cherry picks it for this small price, and they're just cherry picking everything. Netflix was like, they had none of their own stuff.
Yep.
House of Cards was the first show they actually made.
Yeah, and even that, they didn't really own that many of the rights of it, right? They only had U.S. rights.
Even some of the other stuff they're doing, they're buying English shows, pretending it's a Netflix show, but it's really some show that was in England. I think it's amazing. I can't believe they built a business out of what they did. And meanwhile, they're pumping all of it into technology. Hulu also. I think Hulu's really good, too.
I mean, the Hulu's handicapped because they're owners and are so worried about preserving their current businesses. Like, Hulu is, I think, like the salvation for like the networks, right? Hulu should be their big play against Netflix, but they're incapable of committing to it.
But you know what's interesting though? Hulu has people think of it now as the TV place.
Right.
Where I watch the TV shows. I get to see Saturday Night Live the next day, and I get to see the ABC show and all that. They actually have a ton of movies. Netflix has scaled back on their movies.
Netflix is TV now.
Netflix is basically a lot of their own content. Hulu is the one that's investing in the movies. HBO, like if you go to HBO Now or HBO Go, their movie library is big. Starz has a big movie library. It's the on-demand culture. When you have kids,
you think about it though,
you have small ones, right?
Yeah, well, 9 and 5. So
9 and 5. Older. Okay, yeah. The on-demand is when you have kids. It's huge.
Yeah. But you think about it, the entire culture and all of Hollywood in general has shifted to prestige TV in like what is like the really dominant stuff. So yes, they have movies, but in some respects, that Netflix's focus is basically on that sort of content. you know, in HBO that's really their bread and butter as well, is in many respects where things are going. And that lends itself to binge viewing, like, you know, so much is that you just sit down and just watch, you know, 10 episodes at once on a Saturday or something.
What was that, Crown? The Netflix, the show about Queen Elizabeth?
I don't know. I
think it's called The Crown. Yeah. 55 episodes. and it's like Game of Thrones level quality, and they're just banging those out. This would be, you know, HBO makes a couple big shows a year that they invest in, whether it's Game of Thrones, Westworld, or the same thing for Showtime. Like they have Homeland and they have Billions, and they're making 4 or 5 bets. Netflix, like, in its spare time, like, and here's The Crown, and they're just cranking these things out. I don't know where it's going.
Well, I mean, they're all, because they're all spending against the future, right? So Netflix takes on a lot of debt, right? Their cash flow is way negative, and so but when they did that last year, we're like, we just flipped the switch and now we're in like 250 countries. Like, that was such a power move, because it's like we are creating content, and now when they did the OC, or not the OC, what am I thinking of? Was it called the OC? What was the big hit last summer? The 80s hit.
Oh, the Stranger Things.
Stranger Things,
yeah,
sorry. Where did I get the OC from?
The OC.
Maybe the OA.
Oh, the OA, that's what I'm thinking of.
You're mixing 5 shows.
But that was the first one where they actually produced it from the very beginning, because they've been buying shows until now, right? But when they produce from the very beginning, they're keeping all the profits and all the rights for everything. And you're going to see them doing that more and more. It's more expensive. It's more risky. But now they're getting to the size and strength where that just means the long-term payoff for them is going to be even higher than it is going forward. And the thing I always think about is, so like Silicon Valley, all these companies spent like 25 years eating each other. And then the internet and mobile came along, and so like, let's stop eating each other and let's like look at the rest of the world. And everyone's just like these helpless like little animals running around, are these like lions and tigers that have honed like 25 years of evolution, just coming in and just like destroying everyone. I mean, you said everyone here's like, I just want to make some really good content. And Netflix like, okay, you can make some good content. That's nice. And they're like, we just devoured your entire business, by the way.
Yeah. Where do you see Amazon fitting into this?
Amazon's the biggest monster of them all. Like,
wow,
anyone.
So when you're in the Thompson Power Rankings, Amazon's
number one. Yeah,
really? Okay,
in a clear lead.
Clear lead.
Yeah. What makes Amazon's goal is to basically take a skim off of all economic activity.
Okay.
So the most obvious example is AWS, right? They have this monster where they have infrastructure in almost all new companies and lots of old companies. They run all their servers on Amazon's infrastructure, and they pay Amazon. Basically, they're paying Amazon like a fee or like a tax on like everything that they do, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a very clear example of what they're doing. But e-commerce, right? Amazon started as a traditional retailer where they buy a bunch of crap and then they sell it to you, or good stuff too. But now Amazon's shifting over time where they're just a platform. And basically what happens is third-party merchants pay Amazon to hold stuff in Amazon's warehouse. And so Amazon not even paying inventory costs. They're paying them for it. And then when they sell it, they pay Amazon like 15 to 20% commission. And so Amazon's not even...
They're like a loan shark.
They're just a middleman. And they do all the fulfillment. They do the same with logistics, right? They just announced this $1.5 billion air hub, like next door to UPS. Yeah. And they're buying planes like, we're just going to help our partners, right? They're not going to help their partners. They're going to build like baseline capacity and spikes like let the other guys take care of it, which is a terrible business. And they're going to own all the logistics, right? And it's not just the business though. It's that Amazon itself, the way it's constituted as a company and the way they're a systematic company that is systematically build systems, if that makes sense. Like, and the way that they generate these new companies is repeatable in a way that all these Silicon Valley companies are all product companies, right? They make a great product. They make the iPhone. They make Google search. They make Facebook. And those can be great businesses, but those aren't trillion-dollar businesses. Trillion-dollar businesses are ones where you build platforms and people just build entire companies on top of you and you just take a skim. That's what Microsoft did for a long time. Amazon's doing it, but like 10x.
And Twitter. Oh no, wait, Twitter's not doing that at all.
Twitter is a product company that doesn't know how to build a good product.
Why? What is I've heard a million theories on this. Why is Twitter so incompetent?
I think the root cause for Twitter's incompetence is the unbelievable sort of managerial turmoil at the very beginning of the company.
They never recovered from it.
They never recovered. The initial idea was so good.
Yeah.
And it almost like handicapped them. It was so good that they never had to figure out. Like most companies, they kind of have an idea, but they have tested and they get like what's called product market fit. They figure out, oh, this is the right product for the market. And then they go and they build it, right? Twitter's initial version had like almost perfect product market fit from day one. So they were free to, on the side, they could bicker with each other and fight about stuff. And basically the product has barely evolved in its entire lifetime. Everyone's like,
barely is like a compliment.
Everyone's like, oh, Twitter, they're young, they're growing. Twitter's a 11-year-old company. Like, this is an old product.
That looks effectively the same as it did in 2007.
Yeah, and they had like, Twitter could have been a monster. It should have been this sort of platform where all kinds of apps run across it. They're basically like a protocol, right? And then they should be the ad network inside every other app. They don't necessarily need to monetize on Twitter.
Also, they could have monetized it.
I mean,
why couldn't it be?
Well, the data's so valuable.
5 tweets a day, and then every tweet after that, you got to be a Twitter premium, and you got to pay $10.99 a month.
They wouldn't even do that. The problem is you're limiting your audience, right? People don't like to pay for that, but
you don't have to. If they got 5 tweets a day, if you want to do more than that, pay. Well, if you want to have more than 140 characters for a tweet, it's a nickel per character. There's a million things they could have done.
Well, just look at the world where tweets move markets, right?
Yeah.
And Twitter barely earns anything on their data. Like, they just sell off, like, data streams. Like, they give away to Google. Like, I was like, oh, Google should acquire Twitter. Twitter did this deal with Google, like, a year ago where they gave Google all their tweets. And it's like, so Google basically bought the company without having to pay a dime for it.
Right.
I mean, it's mad. Yeah. Everyone sees the downsides now, but those seeds were all planted,
when your attitude is, hey man, if it's not broke, you don't fix it. That's never worked in the history of mankind.
No,
and that's also led to a lot of
Facebook, right? Facebook's like, Snapchat's coming along. We're going to take Instagram, one of our most valuable properties, and we're going to potentially fuck it up. Oh, that's why we're not in East Panic Square. That's right.
Yeah,
and we're going to
totally
put stories in there, and it's a total ripoff. But you know what? Like, look at the scoreboard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, it matters. Like, you don't get brownie points for all these companies. Like, they get so hung up on being quote unquote innovative. The fact of the matter is, to come up with an innovative product is like when the hardest that resonates is impossibly hard. Startups do it because they have no choice. It's the only way to succeed. Once you're Facebook and you have a shit ton of money, why wouldn't you go buy people? Why wouldn't you rip off stories? Like, you have the audience, you have the trump card. No pun intended. You you can do.
Hey, we need a new phrase that's better
than
than trump
card. He's ruining everything.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it has led to a lot of sports disasters. Yeah. With teams and leagues and just everything. You got to keep moving. Facebook's done a pretty good job of moving. Twitter has done. I mean, there'll be books and documentaries about it at some point.
I mean, you've heard the Zuckerberg quote about Twitter, right?
I don't remember.
Twitter is like, what is it? Twitter is like if a clown car backed into a gold pit or something like that, or a pit of gold or something like that. His quote is actually much better. I just totally butchered it, but it's the perfect encapsulation of the company.
But they had so many smart people behind the scenes of it. I mean, maybe they had too many smart people. That could have been part of the problem.
Yeah.
You look at all the people who were involved behind the scenes, and it's a who's list of successful people, and yet they couldn't figure it out.
I think that's part of the problem. There was a lot of conflict. There's also a lot of the, they caught lightning in a bottle. And was that because they were really smart, or were they really fortunate? And now everyone thinks they're really smart because they got really fortunate.
Yeah. Well, if they get rid of if they handle the troll problem and they figure out a couple different ways to innovate over these next year and a half.
Basically they changed their behavior from the last 11 years as a company.
It's the same thing like if you're talking about a terrible sports team that's been like, well, if the Browns get a quarterback and they get the right coach, and it's like, well, they're the Browns.
That's exactly it. It's because it's cultural. It goes to the very core of the company.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with sports teams, right? They're just screwed up. I'm a Milwaukee Bucks fan. I know this very, very well, right? For us, the light at the end of the tunnel is always a train.
Right.
And like, I think that's the same thing with companies, right? It's just, you are who you are, for better or worse.
That's interesting. That has to be the first Milwaukee Bucks Twitter comparison.
It feels apt.
That's ever happened. I'm trying to think who that's more insulting to. I think it's better for the Bucks. It's probably the best thing that's happened to the Bucks since the 2001 Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah,
Or
and then-
2000. What was it? No,
So who are the refs in this scenario?
01. Have you gone on internet deep dive about that? Bucks Sixers?
Oh, we were doing deep dives the day it happened. I mean,
There's a long footnote in my book about it.
Yeah, I read it.
About how that was. Everyone always focuses on Kings Lakers.
No,
'cause
that
Shaq
one
and
was
Kobe
way
were in it.
worse.
Bucks Sixers was worse.
Yeah.
And really could be
like there were
a
just
30 for 30.
utterly indefensible calls. Like even the Lakers Kings ones, there was some bad calls, but a
It was
lot
really
of them were
confined to
like
2 games.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But even some of them, they're like, you could at least concoct a story where that was like the right call. There were fouls in that Bucks Sixers series that were.
Well, what was the free throw advantage? I think it was like 180 to 115 or something. And Philly really was an outside shooting team that just had Iverson go to the basket.
Yeah,
once in a while.
like compared to their season averages for free throw attempts, it was wildly out of whack.
But then Scott Williams got suspended before Game 7, like an hour before.
Oh,
that was another
unbelievable.
one. Yeah, it was bad. I mean, it was bad in the moment, and people were talking about it in the moment, like, this is really fucked up. What is going on here? It's that 1999 to 03 stretch in the NBA. There's
rough.
a lot of chicanery. It was pre-internet. You can't do that stuff anymore on the internet.
Yep.
You have to be much more.
It's incredible. It's so like I loved it when LeBron just destroyed Barkley like last week.
Yeah.
Because not just because he was right, but also the way Barkley talks about like today's NBA.
Yeah.
When like from any objective measure, it's such a vastly better product than it was. Particularly that period.
Different.
It's different, but stuff like that, right? You can't get like it's so much of like a cleaner league.
Oh, true.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, that's just the quality of play, but everything about it is so much better than it was. I mean, the NBA always had super shady shit kind of going on, like in the 80s and 90s, right? Like, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I think every league did.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot easier or it's a lot more risky to do stuff now. Like in 2017, if you were just going to suspend somebody's quarterback for 4 games. Oh, wait, that just happened. Bad example. No, I do think that for the most part, you have to be more careful.
It's like Facebook versus Twitter. Like as far as like one's like bumbling around, don't know what he's doing, and the other one is just executing. And
that's
like,
another
boom,
where
boom,
I don't
boom,
know
boom.
who got insulted more there, Goodell or Twitter. I think Goodell's probably better and more successful.
Yeah,
I mean, he makes $44 million a year.
No, this is the point I was making about people are thought of as being smart because they're fortunate.
Right.
That's, I think, Goodell is an apt example of that.
So is Twitter salvageable?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I love Twitter. I love it probably more than any product that I use. Like I love the iPhone. I would rather have Android and Twitter than an iPhone and not Twitter. I feel, especially the last few months, it's gotten so toxic. Like, it's getting toxic to the point where people, if you have any degree, and you learn this, you don't even look at your replies anymore, right? If you have any degree of visibility on Twitter, it's awful. It's just, and I don't know, maybe it might be just that I've become more visible, so I'm more aware of this, and so I think the product's gotten even worse, or the atmosphere's gotten even worse. But it feels like it's kind of crossed a line in the last few months.
They could fix some of that, though. I think that's fixable. At least some of the troll stuff. I still feel
but the problem is there's tons of stuff that are super obvious and they haven't done them yet. I mean, the problem is I think they won't do them because I think there's only I think the actual number of real users of Twitter is much, much lower than the number that they report.
Oh, and especially I think I have 5.4 million. I don't even know how many followers I have, and I guarantee I don't have whatever the number is.
Right.
I bet it's half.
Well,
maybe less than half.
Not just that, but even I myself, I control 5 active Twitter accounts. I have one for my website, one for my podcast.
What does that mean?
Right. Well, they're all counted as active
You're one
users.
person, right?
Right, exactly. And then you have all the spam and stuff like that. Like this spam is not hard to kill. Like this is a solved problem, and they don't kill it. Why? Well, active users is the most important metric that they have. Kind of, draw your own conclusions. And as long as they need to be bought out. They have to be private, whether they're bought by, who's going to acquire them? No one, who wants to deal with this? Who wants to have protesters? Because
the trolls and all that stuff makes it a very scary thing for somebody like Disney.
Right, exactly.
Bob Iger has to deal with trolls.
Yeah.
That's not, what about Snapchat?
I mean,
Snapchat's like the cute. Everybody thinks they're just adorable right now. Oh, those wacky Snapchat.
believe me, they're going to get starting to heat now, especially once their
just on the
results
record,
are out.
I like Snapchat. I like the way they think. I'm pro Snapchat.
So I am pro Snapchat because I think Evan Spiegel is a product visionary of the sort like we haven't seen
chances.
in years.
Yeah.
No, I mean, he is the best consumer guy, I think, in tech since Steve Jobs. Like, I think he's that good. The problem is that Snapchat doesn't have a good business. Well, the problem is, one, Facebook and Google are so dominant when it comes to advertising. They need to figure out how to break into that. Two, the fact that Instagram could basically rip off stories and that could.
Why'd you say basically?
Okay, directly.
That was a flat out Jay Leno ripoff.
But what actually matters is that Instagram has 500 million users and Snapchat has 150 million, 200 million, whatever it is. And what actually matters for social networks is how many users you have. And Snapchat's growth has slowed down significantly, and it's perfectly correlated with that happening.
Yeah.
And that's not a good sign. And they have other stuff like if you want to get into technical details, like how much it costs to serve one of their users keeps going up. So they have like a cost problem. And basically you bet on Snapchat because you believe in Evan Spiegel. And I actually think that's a valid reason to bet on them, but it is a pure bet. Like they look like a real company, but they're not a real company yet. From a business perspective.
So I have an 11-and-a-half-year-old daughter, Snapchat, Instagram user, on Instagram more.
Yeah,
but I've been told about a year and a half from now, it'll really shit to Snapchat. Right now, she's like Snapchat filters and likes changing the pictures, stuff like that, but really loves Instagram and just going through the photos. And I say, man, Instagram's just a good product.
Yeah.
It's like, here's some photos. Just scroll through. It couldn't be easier. You turn your brain off and you rip through them.
Yeah.
And it's not going away. I love
unbelievable acquisition. Like one of the all-time greatest.
And I love the fact that Twitter is still like Twitter's even in the ballgame with this anymore. They're so petty that if you do an Instagram link on your Twitter feed, it stays the link. It doesn't translate it to the picture. It's
come
on, Twitter.
So Twitter gets a lot of grief for that, but the reality is that Instagram's the one that screwed Twitter. Because Instagram got started by basically you could import your entire Twitter contacts into Instagram and you have an instant network.
Yeah.
So Instagram built their network off of Twitter's back. And by the time Twitter was going on, it was already too late. Like Instagram had already done it. I mean, So
Instagram's just shameless.
Instagram
will take your wife or husband in 5 seconds.
They have great engineering. They build a really nice product and combined with shamelessness. That's a powerful combination.
Yeah,
you have great skills in shamelessness. You can go far.
Jeez. Any up-and-comers you see? Anyone in the conversation that potentially 3 years from now?
I mean, the consumer space is it's like the sexy space. Everyone knows about these companies, but it's by far the most difficult space to compete in. I mean, and especially now because Snapchat, all these consumer companies monetize through advertisements. But Facebook and Google are so utterly dominant. Like Facebook and Google took like more than 100% of growth in advertising last year because other people were shrinking. And it's just almost impossible to not necessarily to get a breakthrough product, but like Snapchat's showing. Snapchat has a huge number of daily active users. They have this super attractive demographic, right? And so they have a chance. But if even them with their massive audience and their great demographics, if it's still a real question they can build a viable business going forward, like it's hard to see what works there in the future. I mean, I just hope Facebook acquires you. So
it's 2017 now. We only have technically 3 more years left in this decade, the 2010s. And you think about it that way, we're more than 2/3 of the way through the decade. What have been the great innovations / companies that we're going to remember when we think back to the 2010s? Like if you look back at the 2000s, it's like Facebook, Twitter, Netflix.
Yeah.
We have all these things you point to. What is it for this decade?
Well, I think it is the companies like Uber and Airbnb and things like that.
So you'd say Uber, Airbnb, Snapchat.
Those are probably the big 3 from a sort of consumer perspective.
Pornhub
Slack,
Premium.
Yeah, Slack has the potential to be in here too.
Oh yeah, Slack. Slack is my favorite of the last couple of years.
Yeah,
I'm drinking the Slack Kool-Aid. We use it at the Ringer. We have 100 Slack channels within our little Slack.
What's
feed.
fascinating about Slack is it's kind of like it's very much a consumer product. Like it feels like a consumer product and it spreads like a consumer product with an enterprise business model where you pay per seat on a license sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's very compelling. I'm pretty bullish on them as well. But what's represented by this Uber and Airbnb thing kind of goes back to my iPhone thing at the beginning, where we're moving to this world where you rent stuff and everything is as a service, right? If you think about it, there's so many things we use in our life that we buy just because we don't use it very often. But now that we have a phone with us all the time, internet connection all the time, it's so much more viable to just use stuff as you need it.
I rented him for 2 hours.
The app was really surprising, a little more suggestive than I thought it would be, but.
Yeah, I agree with you on the renting thing. We're going to reach a world where you almost don't need to own anything or have any long-lasting relationships. You could just be in your house and you could just order VR sex and order food and Uber wherever you want. You just have no attachment. You're like Robert De Niro in Heat. You can get away from everything in your life in 30 seconds.
Brave new future.
Yeah, that's where we're going. So what do you see for the future of what you're doing?
I mean, right now the best thing is just keep doing what I do. I make money from subscriptions, and the great thing is like I just do the same amount of work I do now, but my income keeps going up because sending emails free. Yeah, so it's funny because I read a lot about media as well as tech, and I read about all the problems that this new world order has for traditional media companies, like zero distribution costs, like all the stuff that makes like Netflix possible, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, all those bad things for old companies are all to my personal benefit. Right. So I'm probably not a completely biased observer about that stuff.
When was the first time you had somebody in a real position of power reach out to you either to sway you or scold you or both?
Twitter got really mad at me a couple years ago. I wrote something pointing out an anomaly in some of their financials. They're like, that's not true, blah, blah. 6 months later, they go,
that was true.
Yeah, it was true.
Yeah.
Probably the funniest one though is I have a service that handles like my memberships, and they emailed me and said, oh, these 3 people, we accidentally double charged them. We already fixed it, but you might want to let them know. And one of them was like the CEO of like a top 5 company. I'm like,
oh my God.
I don't think he's going to know, but like that was probably the wrong person to screw up his payments. So, that was pretty cool because I give all this advice companies and you should, understand your customer, blah, 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 blah. But like, I have actually structured it so I don't need to know who my customers are. Like my price is relatively low, $10 a month. And I like it. I can do whatever I want. And if someone gets mad and cancels subscription, like I don't even notice.
Right.
And so like I almost feel like the more I know who's reading it, it's almost a bad thing. I'd rather just be like, sitting in Taiwan and, being as true to what I think is possible and not worry what people think. And that gets harder the bigger you get. I'm sure you experienced this, right? When you were writing for AOL back in Boston, you can just fire off whatever you want. Once
I'd like to think I kept doing that at ESPN, much to their chagrin.
For better or worse. Yeah.
I think there was definitely at ESPN the first few years when I wrote for them, the internet was still kind of down there. I'm pointing down to the floor.
Right. You were down in the basement.
Yeah, it's just like, well, he's on the internet. And then gradually that shifted. I think 2004 was a big moment for my column on the website because when the Red Sox lit that whole run and I was leading ESPN every day and it was like a national columnist basically, which hadn't really happened before.
Right.
So there's these little victories that the website had. And then at some point in the mid 2000s, all of a sudden it became like the establishment. But I don't feel like that was the case the first few years I was there. And then I started noticing like around 07, 08, that's when coaches and GMs and commissioners and assistant commissioners and all of a sudden it was like, oh shit, like
people care.
Everybody's reading our website.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
yeah. You could just kind
of
like
you feel very gratified that they're reading it, but like
you feel
the responsibility and like pressure, like totally skyrockets because it's like you really can't screw it up now.
Well, and also I think it makes you. This is going to sound bad, but it really makes you think about what you're writing about people.
Yeah,
and I realized especially at my old site, I was just too mean. But the first couple of years at ESPN, you're writing and you're thinking like, well, they'll never read it, or that's not really. They're like these people that aren't people.
Right.
And then when you start crossing paths with someone, it makes you think like, oh shit, put some thought into this. Like this, if I'm going to really eviscerate this team and they're going to read it, I want to make sure I'm fair.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons I like your stuff is in the wrong hands, your column could be, a real menace to that, you could really use some of your sway that you have at this point in a really negative way, and you don't. You try to be fair.
It's still hard though, because I honestly think one of the advantages of living in Taiwan is
you're not going to run into these people.
No, it's true. I mean, San Francisco is so like incestuous, right? You think Hollywood's bad. I mean, like, well, it's actually probably very similar, right? You go to a coffee shop, talk about tech. You go to a restaurant, talk about tech. Like, it's tech. And not just that, but everyone switches jobs. Every 2 years. So the person you're thinking about criticizing, you might be working with or wanting to invest with or whatever. And so not being there, I think, is a little liberating. But even now that I know more and more people, like, you feel it. I mean, there was probably the most direct column I've written is I wrote that the former CEO of Twitter should be fired. And like, he'd reached out to me previously about something I wrote, and it was very complimentary. And like, when I was writing that, like that note was like in the back of my head. I felt bad, right? It's like he was so nice to me, but like I felt it needed to be written. Yeah. And I stand by it. I think it was correct. But it's true. Once you start actually building any sort of connection, it becomes way harder. And it
also
kind of keeps me out of San Francisco, honestly.
Yeah, I had it in Boston because I was always writing that Doc Rivers should get fired.
Right.
And I was writing as a fan and just like, this guy sucks as a coach. We got to get rid of him. I don't know if the media is protecting him. And I was wrong because I was overrating, he was better than I was giving him credit for. I don't think he did a good job until KG showed up. But that was the first time I really realized, like, I should be framing this differently. Like, I'm writing this like it's 1999 on the internet.
Right.
And I should be a lot more fair than I'm being. And I think, I think when people use their platforms in, it can be dangerous. And by the way, we've seen that at the highest level of our office right now. Like, you can have a high platform and it can be dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely.
You should have called your website Made in Taiwan. If you had to do it over again, over Stratechery.
Well, the only problem is, what if I move?
I'm still getting it wrong.
I listen. Yeah, I like the Vucevic analogy. Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Made in Taiwan's a good name for a website.
Yeah, but is that? I mean, what
I guess it wouldn't explain what your thing is.
Yeah. I think it would be taken in multiple directions. We'll put it that way.
Give me one thing that I'd be shocked to know about Taiwan in a good way. Because I know nothing about Taiwan. I literally know nothing other than that their Little League teams have been really good.
Taiwan is the 14th richest country in the world. Like, a lot of people think about it like as a developing country, but no, it's super modern. It's okay. Like, the way I say about Taiwan is Asia is like incredible, right? There's all these amazing places to visit. You ask me where to visit, I wouldn't know where to start almost. But if you're looking for a place to live, it's a phenomenal place to live. Like, the people are great. It's pretty English friendly. It's easy to get around. You're in Taipei, 30 minutes from the mountains, 30 minutes from the beach. It's, so no, I'm a big fan. I mean, the big reason I'm there, my wife's from there. I met her after school. And so we're close to family. And the other great thing is, because I write a daily newsletter, right? So I work in Taiwan and I press publish at like 6 p.m. And 70% of my readers are in the U.S. They wake up, it's in their inboxes.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's actually
time zone advantage.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage, actually. When I come back to the States every summer with my kids to bring them to Wisconsin to my parents, and it's hard, man. It's hard to be on U.S. time to write for a U.S. audience like that. So,
is
it's
there
a great
Taiwanese food?
Oh, that's
different than like
yes.
Chinese food, Japanese food?
Yes, Taiwanese.
What is it?
It's its own. So there's a so their most famous thing is like they have like these night markets and lots of like interesting concoctions and stuff. But just in general Chinese food, like there's a luo fan is a very famous one. It's like this slow stewed pork that's cooked for like, because street food, right? So it's like you have
stews.
rice. No, it's like rice with like pork on top and stuff like that. Then there's fried chicken. There's all kinds of noodles and rice dishes. It's well known for the cuisine.
Because in my life, nobody's ever said to me, "Hey, I found this new Taiwanese restaurant. We got to go tonight."
No, yeah, I mean, have you been to Din Tai Fung, like the dumpling place?
Okay, so that qualifies.
Yeah, that's Taiwanese.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
I think they need better PR.
They probably do. In Asia, I think Taiwan's pretty well known for being a food destination. Like people go there. It's not great for like food from other countries necessarily, but Taiwanese food itself. Oh, beef noodle soup is Taiwan's super famous for that. Some incredible places. But yeah, the food's a good thing. If you ever come over, I can.
This is leading to a text from Joe House about the beef noodle soup. Hey, he's not going to care about anything else we talked about. He's like, hey, so Ben talked about beef noodle soup. Where do I get that? That does sound really good.
It is good.
All right, so Stratechery.
Stratechery, STRATECHEROY.
And what's your Twitter account?
At Ben Thompson.
Anything else we need to plug?
I have podcast exponent.fm, basically talking about what I wrote about Stratechery a lot of the time. But my co-host is a Australian guy, so and we get along pretty well. So it's pretty popular as well.
All right, nice to finally meet you. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be here.
All right.
All right, thanks so much to Ben Thompson. Remember, we have one more Bill Simmons podcast coming up this week, as well as a column that I'll be writing for TheRinger.com. And don't forget to check out the Ringer NBA show and the Ringer NFL show. I talked to Mike Lombardi on the Ringer NFL show and talked about the Boogie Cousins trade on the Ringer NBA show. Oh, I forgot. On Channel 33, I went on Bachelor Party with Juliet Littman and Mallory Rubin. Yeah, lively. Almost a little raunchy at times. Gotta say, they bring out a little bit of a raunchy side that I usually don't unleash on the podcast. But we had a fantasy suite conversation that, it wasn't quite NC-17, but I think it might have been rated R. Anyway, check that out. Check out the old podcast that we've done the last couple weeks if you missed any. And come back soon on the Bill Simmons podcast. Thanks to SeatGeek. Don't forget to go to SeatGeek. Download their free app. Go to SeatGeek.com. See you Friday.